Welcome back to another episode of NFL News on the Boom Bust channel. I'm your host Terry, and today, episode 100 of NFL News. Look, last year I kind of fell into a pattern that I like where we check in every quarter. So really we would be the first four games, but we'll get to that and we'll still talk about that. But there's so much happening in this first 2 weeks that I want to talk about. And really, I'm starting to really like week 2, but we'll see next year kind of what we do with that. Because week 1 I hate because it's so overreactionary. It's crazy. It's all these declarations. And then week 2 is the counter to the overreaction. And so I still think, expectations and thoughts are not correctly aligned, but at least it's better than week 1. But anyway, a lot going on that I wanted to talk about. So there's 3 main things we want to touch on, and I think that they all kind of flow into each other. So let's talk about the quarterbacks first. Let's do that up front because I think that flows to the next topic. So the quarterbacks, we'll kind of do a quarterback roundup and go around the league and talk about what's happening. We'll start with the biggest one up front. We got Bryce Young, who is now benched for the Carolina Panthers. And there's a lot of discussion about it. And to be honest, I think this discussion has been surprisingly more, it's been more civil than I would expect it. Obviously, we got a lot of coverage in sports media, so that's not new. But maybe because there's more player voices with podcasts and things like that, maybe because every team is kind of taking the Hard Knocks approach and their social media team does a lot of back behind the scenes social media content. For whatever reason, I do feel the conversation has moved. Now, look, when you're dealing with the internet, you got trolls, you got idiots, you got people that just don't know what they're talking about. You got people that just want to fight. So I'm not saying it's great, perfect, or that it moved a lot. But I think in the logical football community, and especially in sports media, the needle has moved a little bit. I've said many times before, we live in this society, especially in the last 7 years or so, we really been into this binary world, this black and white. You're good, you bad. You suck, you're great. And it's crazy how it fluctuates. But anyway, we're moving away from that a little bit, especially when it comes to players. And I'm starting to hear people take more context in. And again, your random fan, they're only going to use context when it works for their argument. But I think overall we recognize that this ain't just a player thing. And I've been saying that forever. For people that follow my draft content, I've been saying that since I started this in like 2017 or whenever I started, that I don't use bust. If I'm talking about bust, I'm really talking about the GM. I'm not talking about the player because it's not just the player's fault. But anyway, Bryce Young, that actually flows into the conversation that I want to get into. But I'll just say quickly that I believe, at least today, that this could possibly be the right move. And I mean, if we're not just doing something just to do it, because we've heard owners that say, hey, I just got to make a splash. I just got to do something. And a lot of fans and a lot of players believe in that. I don't. I think that's just dumb, but whatever. So if that's what they're doing, not aboard, obviously it's terrible. But if this is, hey, because a lot of people like me that say rookies are getting thrown into the fire, what do we always ask for? Let them sit and develop. So if a rookie is over his head, what are we asking you to do? Let him sit and develop. So I'm hoping that's what they're doing now and that they're allowing him to kind of get his bearings and it's not just throwing him to the wayside. So that's kind of what I think as far as that. So Caleb Williams, I talk a lot because I talk about the Bears, but I'll touch on him real quick as well. Definitely just, I think not really adjusting and I won't say not adjusting, slowly adjusting to the NFL. And we see it a lot. We saw it with Bryce. We see it with a lot of quarterbacks, even Hall of Famers. You adjust to the speed. You realize the throws you made and the timing you did in college can't happen in the NFL because they're a lot faster. And it's just overall a bad deal with the offensive line, with his decision making, and with the offensive game plan, at least against the Texans. I thought the game plan against the Titans wasn't bad necessarily. We just couldn't block them. And so I think it's just a perfect storm, and Caleb is nowhere near as polished as some people might have hoped, but we'll keep moving. And CJ Stroud, I'll say this because there's people that want to go back to the discussion of Stroud and be like, oh, I told you he's a bust and all this. Look, anybody with any real type of evaluation, experience, like a Mel Kiper, those type people, we're not going to run away from bad evaluations. And I don't think Bryce was a bad evaluation, not only because everybody saw the same thing, but because just because someone's not working out doesn't mean they don't have those talents and traits that you saw, which again, it just matters what happens. But in terms of Stroud versus Young, because that's the conversation everybody wants to have. And I was thinking about it too. I was like, why'd I have him over? The thing is, I had Stroud rated very high. Number 2 for sure, quarterback. My thing with Stroud, which I'm sure with a lot of people, is he got bit by that Ohio State. Not even bias, it's just kind of that history. And I'm not one of those guys. There's a lot of coaches that'll do that. I never seen a safety from Wyoming that was good, so I don't believe him. That, like, I don't do that. But for me, it don't even gotta be Ohio State. It could be any of these top programs. You get into a position where you have such a dominant offensive line around you, because the skill positions is great too, yes, but it's the O-line that makes the big difference. When you get these guys from these big programs that have dominating offensive lines, it's like you never get to see what they actually can do in the pocket and how they'll react. So for me with Stroud, it wasn't a negative, it was a question mark. And it was the same thing I had with Justin Fields. Again, so I think a lot of people were like, we don't know exactly how it looks when the pocket's not perfect. And yes, there is a long history of quarterbacks coming out of Ohio State that couldn't make that transition because they no longer had those perfect pockets. And CJ, not only watching him last year, but watching him up close this week against my Bears, and man, and don't get me wrong, the Texans offensive line doesn't get enough credit for what they did last year with backups. They don't get enough credit outside of Tunsil. But still, there's moments where the pocket isn't great, and he's great. He's great in the pocket, and it's just something you never would have known at Ohio State because he didn't have to do that. So that's, at least for me, my 2 cents on that. Okay, so that's those two. And then you got some of these full circle moments, man. I don't want to touch on every single quarterback, but you get guys like a Baker Mayfield who's playing well for the second year in Tampa. You get a guy like a Sam Darnold where people are like, whoa, and it was pretty much very clear Sam Darnold was going to start. But yeah, everybody keeps saying, well, JJ McCarthy got injured, so now he's got this opportunity. He was going to have the opportunity. And I was saying all summer, I'm like, yeah, JJ, even if he looks good, Sam's going to start. And he's going to do well because he has 2 top 20 tackles and the best receiver in the game, if not a top 5 receiver, and a really good offensive scheme that not only is good, but it has continuity with a lot of players that have been there. And so I think people just absolutely, whether it's those guys, whether it's Goff, even Malik Willis in his one game, Geno Smith, I don't understand. And this is what I keep talking about. It's so simple, and I don't understand what is this issue that people don't get. and that is the quarterbacks, every position, but quarterbacks especially, you're a dependent position. And yes, people say you get paid a lot. And yes, an elite quarterback, quote unquote, is supposed to fill the gaps. And yes, it all sounds good on fantasy. It sounds good on Madden. But in real life, that's not how that goes. So just because I'm the third overall pick doesn't mean you can give me absolutely nothing and I'm going to just make magic out of it. And the other thing is that people seem to really ignore bad stretches. So, for example, people will sit here and say Daniel Jones is bad. And it's the people that, and I don't mean to say that Daniel Jones is great, but it's the people that definitively say Daniel Jones is bad. I know he's bad. I'm not considering no other context. He's bad because he's bad. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what's around him. He's bad. It's those people who get shocked when they see a Sam Darnold playing well or Brock Purdy, Mr. Relevant, playing well. It's like they can't even fathom it. So it's like, and I use my favorite example, the 49ers. So if I pick up Daniel Jones and put him on the 49ers and he had a season with them, these are the same people that be like, oh my God, I have no idea how that's even possible. Wow, Shanahan's a miracle worker. And it's just like, because you are being so surface level, people are not good and bad in a vacuum. It rarely works that way. All the context matters. And again, casual fans will use that when they want to. They'll say it don't matter for Daniel Jones, but let you talk about Lamar and all you're going to hear is about the O-line. But anyway, so it's those type of people that can't fathom why quarterbacks might look different elsewhere. And to me, it's so simple. So you look at a guy like a Pat Mahomes. Pat Mahomes off to a rough start this year. Off to a rough start last year, halfway through the season. They still won a Super Bowl, but a down year. And then he had a down year, which I believe he had Tyreek Hill. That was the year everybody was like, they figured out Mahomes cover 2. Had a down year. You have Lamar off to a rough start, rough games in the playoffs. You have obviously Josh Allen kind of brings it on himself, but he has rough patches. Even Burrow has had rough patches. So you look at these quarterbacks with championship contending rosters, and they have stretches of poor play. Even with all that stuff around them, they have stretches of poor play. What do you think is going to happen to a quarterback with a bottom 5 roster? It just doesn't make sense to me. So really use your brain and really think about that. And it's not to say these quarterbacks don't have any talent. Obviously they do, and they bring different skill sets. But what's around you completely matters. And so that goes to the next point. When we're talking about the quarterbacks, if people don't see what's happening, I talked about this in the summer, and I'll link it at the end of this video. But I said there's a quarterback development crisis. I pointed this out in the off season, and I had a few people laugh at me, go, whatever, try to push back. And now look at where we are. A number 1 overall pick is benched 2 games into his second season. That is insane. The 2021 draft class, I believe that's what it was, Trevor's class, everybody's gone except for Trevor out of the first round as quarterbacks. Everybody's off their team. Sam Howell, a low round pick, got traded away after 1 year of starting. He wasn't even a first round pick. Traded away. So, as I said, the timeline is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So if people don't see what's happening, you're seeing the owners try to get these contracts not out of the league, but they're trying to shrink these contracts. The number of them, I should say. So all these big record numbers, they're trying to weed that out if possible, because nobody wants to have and Daniel Jones is a great contract, even at the time, but nobody wants that. Nobody wants, Tua is a different situation, but nobody wants to sign and tie up most of their salary cap to a person who isn't worth that type of money. But the market is saying you got to pay people like that. And so what are we seeing? Well, if that's the case, they need to be out there right now, which is why it's just commonplace for rookies to start. And then on top of them being out there right now, you got a short window to show me I should even consider giving you another chance, because if number one pick overall, even though you traded for, you gave up a lot, but let's just say in general, number one overall pick, because we were the worst team. We take a guy and I play 16 games and I'm like, you know what? I don't think he has it. So why waste other draft capital? Why even, consider tying our future books up? Why do anything with that guy? Let's just get rid of him. Yeah, we missed on the number one pick or a high first round pick, but at least we didn't miss out on all this money. At least we're not wasting time trying to force him into the field. That's what they're thinking. And so you're legit about to have maybe a year to show, okay, you're worth going forward with. And then the second year, if you do it again, then we're going to start talking about paying you. And that's what's about to happen to Stroud. That's exactly what's about to happen to Stroud. I guarantee you, even if they could pay him right now, they wouldn't. They will wait for that second year, make sure he's able to adjust to the league, and then they're going to be like, okay, let's start talks and we'll pay you. And then in that first year, if you're looking shaky, just like Bryce, they might give you a game next season and they're ready to cut ties. So because they are, and what's going to happen is, and what's already been happening is, the rate of quarterback turnover and churning has skyrocketed, and it's only about to get higher. And I talked about all this in the offseason. And then you get a guy like Tom Brady saying it. Now, a lot of people say they didn't agree with him, but a lot of people say, oh, he makes sense. This is what I've been saying for over a year. They're doing no favors to these quarterbacks. And no, we're not saying nobody can't start right away. But as I was talking to somebody today, one of my colleagues, people got to realize these are people. We keep saying that, and I don't think y'all understand. If you graduate college or high school and you get a new job in a new city, to think about, okay, tomorrow you got to be here. Congratulations, you got the job. Tomorrow you got to be here. All the things you have to do, all the things you got to adjust to. And then not only figure that out, you got to go perform right now in your job. But not only perform, there's millions, billions of people watching you do your job. Come on now. Think about this. Think about the benefit it is to have even a game, to just adjust to the weekly schedule of NFL, to see what it all looks like, let alone to have time to watch film throughout the season and see how teams are covering y'all plays and how they're scheming against your playbook. Like, all that is valuable. And even if it's not, hey, sit for a year, even if it is go start right away, not with the expectations that, hey, you got like a few games to show us that you're a superstar in the league. That is insane. So not only, physically, but definitely mentally and emotionally, what y'all doing to these quarterbacks. And it's adding to the rate of which quarterbacks are just burning out. And you got some guys that persevere and stay through the league, and they might have that second chance story like a Geno Smith or Sam Darnold is having right now, or Baker. And so you have some guys that persevere, but we're not giving these players time. We're not giving these coaches time, and we're not developing them. And it's not only throwing them out on the field, it's what we're doing with the playbooks. And so, as I've said before, and Tom Brady and others have echoed, they're dumbing down football. And it's I don't even know why it's an argument. Like, the people that's saying that, first of all, well, we'll get to that. I was going to say the numbers are already telling you, but we'll get to that. So not only or people that will push against it, not only is it obvious to see on the field, but many coaches have said that. Lamar Jackson famously, they changed the offense to make it into something that could be efficient for what he could do. And then the idea was to build on it after that. And some people say they didn't, blah, blah, blah. That's not the point. The point was like, we need immediate results. So we're going to put you in. And you get people that argue that. What? Watch the games with Flacco. I'm pretty sure he wasn't running what Lamar was running. So they completely changed that offense on the fly. The Bears did it and said in the press conference, we went and looked at what they did with Lamar, and during our bye week, we completely flipped our offense. That is what the league is doing. And it's not always just a run-heavy quarterback system, but it's whatever it might be. Whatever spread schemes, whatever, they sit down. They might call up their college coach. They sit down with the quarterbacks. What did you run? What did you like? What do you feel comfortable with? What is the verbiage you use? How did y'all do these things? And I think we've gotten away from that a little bit only because it's such a stupid copycat league and everybody's trying to do Sean McVay's version of the Shanahan system. So with so many teams running that, you get a lot of veteran quarterbacks that are in there to help and be another coach. And you got a lot of teams that tell a quarterback, hey, it's beneficial for you to learn this system because then that's going to make you viable in other places. So they're not necessarily changing it a lot like they used to, but best believe when the spread was at its fever pitch and I talked about how the quarterbacks coming out were not ready, NFL ready, they were changing entire schemes and naming systems and everything just to put a quarterback out on the field. And again, you could be effective, maybe a game, maybe half a season, maybe a whole season, but you're not going to develop into a true quarterback off that, where you can't call plays in the huddle, where you can't call multiple plays and cancel and audible out to another play, where you can't do pre-snap reads, where you can't do play action under center. You got to become a professional quarterback. And a lot of that got thrown out the window in previous years. And that's why you have a lot of quarterbacks that just aren't developing. And so Bryce Young is the recent symptom of that, but we see it impacting the league. And that takes me to the next point. Another thing I talked about before the season, this is not a passing league in the way that people talk about. I already did the video on it. I already talked about the numbers. There's nothing to combat. These are raw numbers. And again, a lot of people want to talk as if there was some explosion where it's not even close to what it used to be. And that's just not true. Looking at the numbers of the last 15 years alone, as I said, being generous, the game has went up 2 pass attempts a game on average, in an average game, not across the league. In an average game, being generous, you might see 2 more pass attempts. That is not a significant jump in 15 years. And then not only that, but the last 3 years have been some of the lowest number of attempts per game in the last 15 years. And when you look at that versus the rushing attempts, the rushing attempts decreased in the last 15 years by less than 1 carry per game. So this fantasy narrative that this is a passing league now is not true. And, again, you got people that try to dismiss that. But now we got 2 weeks into the season. What is everybody talking about? The numbers are down. This is the lowest passing touchdowns. Most of the league in a week 1 didn't have 200 yards passing. Running is up. What is happening? It's all a symptom of what's going on with these quarterbacks. First of all, you got Caleb, Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, all starting. JJ McCarthy probably would have eventually started. I don't know. I think Sam would have did a good job, but maybe they would have forced him in. But either way, 4 right there. that are starting, or 3 that are starting rookies. And then on top of that, you got Anthony Richardson, who missed most of the season. You could kind of look at him as a rookie. And then I think I named Caleb Williams, yeah. But then CJ Stroud's in his second year. Not say that he's doing bad. Bryce Young, we know how bad he was. He's gotten benched. There's so many young quarterbacks. And again, think about it last year. Sam Howell, a mid-round pick, was starting because not necessarily next man up. It was because, hey, we're just going to keep turning through quarterbacks to see if we can find something. Brock Purdy was next man up. That's why he ended up starting and then let the job go. But around the league is just so many young quarterbacks. And so that is impacting what's going on. And as I said before, while most of the teams have some version of the Shanahan-McVay system, there's still a lot of just reduced volume of offense because they're trying to spoon feed these quarterbacks and put them on the field while teaching them. So now they're on the field like glorified practice. And not to mention, of course, you got less time in practice, less time in the off season, and so that impacts it too. But the quarterback development is coming to fruition, or the lack of development, and we see it in the numbers. The passing games aren't as sophisticated, and defenses have adjusted. People act like defense will never adjust. They've adjusted to every single thing. There is nothing in the NFL that has just kept running rampant for a decade that hasn't been adjusted to. And so one of the reasons, and you heard it before, that the 49ers are so good, it's not just their roster, it's their tendencies. They're balanced. You don't see the 49ers like some of these teams where it's like, hey, we got this great play and we're going to run it 10 times a game out of different looks. That's not who they are. They're going to run left and right. They're going to run, they're going to pass, they're going to play action. They're going to be balanced. They're going to get outside, they're going to get inside. They're going to do trick. They're going to be balanced. And that's why it's hard, because they don't have tendencies. And so a lot of these teams, though, they kind of get stuck into this simplistic mode, and you don't have a lot of continuity on these offenses because quarterbacks are churning in so fast. And part of that, of the quarterbacks coming in so fast, means the coaches are moving fast, which brings me to my last point. Again, if you haven't seen what's going on, we don't have a lot of head coaches in the league. We don't have a lot of head coaches in the league. Now, of course, people are going to say everybody has a head coach. No. This is what we've heard decision makers talk about, and through reports and otherwise. Essentially, a lot of teams are opting to get glorified QB coaches because that's the only way that they can get them on the team. So I'll use this as an example. This is not meant to be anything real. This is just the name that comes to mind. So Dave Canellis, I believe that's the Panthers coach name. So he's with whatever team, I think Tampa Bay last. So if I'm sitting there and I say, man, I'm bringing in this rookie quarterback, we would love to get Dave Canellis here. I like what he's been doing. I've heard from other coaches what he does will work perfectly. Okay, yeah, we think he'll be a good fit at quarterback coach. That's what we evaluate him as. Okay, they come back to you. Well, other teams are interested, and we're the only ones that think in quarterback coach. Everybody's offering him at least offensive coordinator. Well, we haven't seen him be an offensive OC or offensive coordinator. We don't know what his full offense would look like. We don't know about play calling. I don't know if we're comfortable with that. We just haven't seen it. You know what? We really love his talent. We think it's important to our quarterback. We can go offensive coordinator. We'll live with the bumps in the road. They come back to you. He's got 10 offers, and 2 of them are for head coach. Oh, well, man. OC was a stretch, but head coach. So now at that point, the market is saying head coach. So some teams are going to say, we don't feel comfortable with that. We're just going to have to miss out on David Canellis. Other teams are going to say, we're not comfortable with that, but we want his talent so bad for our quarterback, we'll be willing to do that. And again, I'm not saying that's what happened with him. It's just an example. And so that's what's happening around the league. Now, obviously, it's not everybody. You got some teams that are just they have their philosophy. But a lot of teams over these last few years, not few, the last like 5 to 7, they're getting glorified QB coaches. And so we hear the term hot young offensive guru or QB whisperer, all that stupid stuff. What we're really saying is we're looking at guys that we think will work well with the quarterback, does have some innovative, progressive offensive concepts, but mainly they're going to develop our quarterback. Your head coach's job is not to develop the quarterback. And I'm not even going to get into that long spiel. Hopefully that's pretty understandable. And I've talked about it before. The head coaching job is not a coordinator job. It is completely different. The head coaching job is not necessarily a teaching job, not on the front lines. You're managing personalities. You're managing schedule. You're doing so much more high level stuff than just being on the ground teaching. And so when you get teams that are getting guys not strictly, but mostly because they want them to work with the quarterback, you're doing two things to your team. You're taking away from the coach's time to be a head coach. Well, I guess really it's one thing. You're taking away the head coach's time to be a head coach. Well, I guess no, it's two things. Look at me going back and forth. That's number one. So not only am I not able to spend the time doing the things that a head coach normally would do, I'm spending that time working with this quarterback. But the second part is these guys aren't developing as head coaches because they're too busy playing quarterback babysitter. And it's not just limited to offensive guys either. We've seen with Hard Knocks and Eberflus how much time he has to spend with Caleb because he knows that's where his job is. And so, look, I don't think it's right, as I said, to tell quarterbacks, hey, you got like basically this year to show us you're a star or you're out of here. But then to turn around and say, hey, we're going to fire everybody because the guy's not a star. That's insane. And so I've been complaining about how fast coaches started to get fired. I still remember the day where a coach got fired before Black Monday, and my brain couldn't process it. And now look where we are. People getting fired in the middle of the season like it's basketball. And so what do people think is going to happen? Like Bryce Young, what do you think is going to happen when he has two coaches in his first NFL season? And now he's on his third coach by the time he takes the first snap in the second season. And then it's a brand new system, brand new coach, 2 games into it. Not saying he played well, but what are y'all expecting to happen? And I was going to have a whole section getting on the Baltimore Ravens because they fans been pissing me off this offseason. But I'm going to let y'all have it. I'm going to let y'all live. But I will say this because it's a great example. I had all offseason people tell me how their defense is going to be fine. I'm like, well, we watched the Eagles lose 2 coordinators, and we saw how that really messed up the mojo. And it's not just, some simple as the mojo. People got to realize these are the game planners. Everybody's worried about play calling, which is fine. Play calling is important, but these are the game planners. They put the game plan together. Not only do you have talent and putting it together, but then you got to have the talent to execute teaching it throughout the week to your coaching staff and to your team. So now you got to structure the week. How do we get all these installs? How do we add all these little adjustments this week, and teach it and get us ready for the game. And then you got to be able to adjust in the game. So a coordinator is a huge chunk, because again, the head coach more than likely most time is not sitting there doing game plan for the whole team. The coordinators have to do that. And so when you lose a coordinator, especially a standalone coordinator where it's a structure where they can do their own thing, that can be big. And so the Ravens defense, among personnel issues and a change in coordinator, there's been some early hiccups. And again, that's not even me saying it's going to be bad the whole year. I'm just saying, when I was talking about the Ravens, I'm like, well, based off XYZ that they lost, but also with a new coordinator, it might take time to gel. Oh, it's the same system. He was on the staff last year. Hey, that happened to other teams too. Just because you're on the staff don't mean you know how to be a coordinator. So again, teams are churning out quarterbacks, which in turn is churning out coaching staffs. So now you got people losing their QB coaches, their or their coordinators. People are going in and out, less continuity. And the Bears, like, for whatever reason, I had some people that try to argue about the Bears defense this year. And I'm like, bro, we brought back 10 starters of the 11, and we were really good last year. That, and then obviously the coach came back. That type of continuity these days, you would pay for. Well, apparently not some teams, but you would pay to have that continuity. You would pay as much as you could to your owner to say, get out of our business. Let us keep our staff and build this thing instead of firing everybody all the time. And so that type of continuity is huge. And teams that have it, they stand out, because all of that's important. And so losing continuity because of the coach turnover. But on top of that, again, you got a lot of coaches that just aren't head coaches. They are new to it. They haven't developed, or they were never meant to be head coaches. And so I think all that plays into what we're seeing in the league this year. So that's it for me. Go down the comment section. Let me know what you think. Share it around. Get the conversation started. Thumbs up, subscribe, and thank you for listening.